The discovery of the hidden basement changed everything. Investigators realized this wasn't just a case of jealousy or rage. It was something much deeper, something planned. The items they found were methodically placed, almost like a collection: a locket, a small notebook with coded initials, a few torn photographs, and that old phone with the message, "It's done." When digital forensics dug into the phone, they uncovered a trail of messages between Eric and an unknown contact saved only as E. The irony was almost haunting. Melissa's final unfinished message had been written to E as well, but this E wasn't Eric. The timestamps proved it. These messages were exchanged between two separate phones, both active the night of her death. The messages read like fragments of a plan. "Tonight," one said, "make sure she doesn't talk." Another, "Just minutes before the murder, simply read, check the basement." The new question that haunted detectives: who was the other person Eric had been working with? Detective Miles pushed Eric harder during interrogation. But Eric stayed silent. He stared blankly at the table, hands clasped, muttering that he never meant for it to go this far. When pressed for details, he asked for a lawyer. It seemed like the end of the road, until police ran a background check on his recent contacts. That's when they found someone interesting, a woman named Evelyn Moore. Evelyn had been Melissa's co-worker at the library for nearly 3 years. Friends described her as polite but distant, a loner. No one knew much about her personal life, but records showed dozens of phone calls between her and Eric in the weeks before Melissa's death. When detectives paid her a visit, she appeared calm, cooperative, maybe too cooperative. She claimed she and Eric were just friends, and that they'd spoken only about helping Melissa move on. But when asked where she was the night of the murder, she hesitated for a fraction of a second before answering, "At home." That hesitation was enough to make detectives suspicious. A search of her house revealed the same unique varnish found on the wooden chair. It was subtle, but identical. In her garage, officers discovered an old workbench covered in tools and paintbrushes, and one empty space where a chair once stood. When confronted with the evidence, Evelyn's calm mask cracked. She broke down, sobbing, saying, "I didn't mean to hurt her. She just wouldn't stop." Detectives leaned in. "Wouldn't stop what?" She looked up, eyes red and hollow, and said, "She found out about us. She knew everything." Evelyn admitted she had been in a secret relationship with Eric for almost a year, while he was still with Melissa. When Melissa discovered the affair, she threatened to expose them both. Not out of revenge, but out of fear. She believed Eric was involved in something dangerous, something criminal. But what exactly that was, Evelyn never explained clearly. She said Eric had become obsessed with control. Not just over her, but over Melissa too. He would record conversations, keep track of her schedule, and even talk about making sure no one could ever ruin him again. Evelyn thought it was just paranoia, until the night everything spiraled out of control. According to her confession, Eric called her that night. Panicked, he said Melissa was going to the police with proof. He begged Evelyn to help him fix things. She claimed she drove to Melissa's house only to calm her down. But when she arrived, Eric was already inside. The argument turned violent. She said she screamed at him to stop, but it was too late. Still, detectives weren't sure how much of her story was true. Eric refused to speak, and Evelyn's confession left too many holes. Forensics later proved that both of their fingerprints were on the basement door handle, meaning they had been there together at some point before the murder. Then came the final twist. 3 weeks after their arrest, Detective Miles received a small envelope at the precinct. No return address. Inside was a USB drive. When investigators opened it, they found a single video file, time-stamped 2 days before Melissa's death. The video showed a dimly lit basement, Eric sitting at a table staring directly into the camera. He spoke in a calm, chilling tone. "If you're watching this," he said, "it means she couldn't keep quiet. People think they can play with secrets, but secrets have a cost. She should have listened." Then, the screen went black. But what came after that few seconds of darkness made everyone in the room freeze. The camera flickered back on, and now, Melissa's voice could be heard in the background. She was pleading, terrified, saying, "Please, Eric, don't do this." The file ended there. That recording became the key piece of evidence that sealed both Eric and Evelyn's fate. In court, the jury watched it in complete silence. Eric showed no emotion. Evelyn wept uncontrollably. The judge called it one of the most disturbing cases in Brookdale's history. Both were sentenced to life in prison without parole. But even after the trial ended, certain questions never had answers. Who sent the USB? Why was the basement hidden so carefully? And why did Eric seem almost proud when the verdict was read? Detective Miles later said that the strangest part of all was what they found in Eric's cell weeks after sentencing. A piece of paper with Melissa's handwriting on it. It read, "You'll never bury the truth." To this day, no one knows how he got it. The house on Hawthorne Street was eventually sold, though few people in Brookdale like to talk about it. Locals say the lights flicker there at night, that sometimes they hear faint knocking from beneath the floorboards. Most brush it off as superstition, but every year on the anniversary of her death, someone leaves a single white rose on the doorstep. No one ever sees who does it. Some say it's Evelyn's family. Others believe it's Detective Miles, still haunted by the case. But a few whisper something even darker, that maybe it's Eric's way of reminding everyone he's still in control even from behind bars. The truth about what really happened that night may never be fully known, but one thing is certain. In a town that once believed it was safe, the memory of Melissa Carter's murder has never faded. It lingers like a shadow, a quiet reminder that evil can live anywhere, even next door. And sometimes the people we trust most are the ones we should fear the most. Detective Harris stared at the screen in disbelief. Every second of the footage revealed how carefully Daniel had studied Emily's life. He knew when she left for work, when she came home, even when she called her friends. The videos went back months. Emily must have found something. Maybe one of his cameras or a file he left behind. That's what she knew, and that's why she had to die. When Daniel was confronted with the footage, he finally began to speak. His voice was quiet, detached, as if he were describing something that had happened to someone else. He claimed that Emily had discovered a small lens behind her mirror and confronted him days before the murder. He said she threatened to go to the police, and he panicked. But investigators could tell from the way the crime was executed that nothing about it was impulsive. It was planned. He had waited until she came home that evening, parked outside, and watched her walk into the house. Then, using a spare key he had stolen months earlier, while fixing her kitchen window, he entered through the back door. He waited in the shadows until she walked past the hallway, then struck. The attack lasted less than 2 minutes. Afterward, he wiped down surfaces, took her phone and laptop, and left calmly, locking the door behind him. For the investigators, it was one of the most disturbing cases they had ever handled, not just because of the brutality but because of the level of control and patience Daniel had shown. This wasn't just murder, it was obsession turned into something monstrous. The trial that followed drew massive public attention. Journalists packed the courtroom, and every detail of Daniel's secret life came to light. Dozens of people testified that they had hired him for home repairs, never realizing he had been planting hidden cameras in their houses. The prosecution called him a predator, who used his access to invade the most private parts of people's lives. The defense, on the other hand, tried to paint him as a man suffering from a severe mental disorder, claiming he didn't fully understand what he was doing. But the evidence was overwhelming. Every drive, every recording, every trace of DNA tied back to him. The jury didn't take long to deliver its verdict. Guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder and multiple charges of unlawful surveillance. When the judge read the sentence, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, Daniel didn't react. He simply stared straight ahead, expressionless, as if the words meant nothing. Police immediately contacted Sarah and provided protection until they were sure Daniel hadn't left anything behind. When they searched her house, they found another hidden camera inside a vent above her shower, wired to transmit directly to Daniel's laptop. The realization sent chills through everyone involved. If Emily hadn't uncovered the camera, Daniel might have continued his twisted pattern for years, silently recording and eventually killing again. As the story spread, people across the country began checking their own homes for hidden devices. What started as a local crime became a national conversation about privacy, safety, and trust. News outlets aired interviews with security experts, showing how easy it was for someone with technical skills to invade another person's private life without them ever knowing. Emily's case became a symbol, a reminder of how quickly obsession can turn deadly, and how evil can hide behind the most ordinary faces. Her family established a foundation in her name, dedicated to helping victims of stalking and illegal surveillance. Within a year, that foundation had helped pass new legislation legalizing penalties for such crimes and providing better protection for victims who report harassment early. Detective Harris attended the ceremony where the new law was signed. Standing there, he couldn't help but think back to that first day, the open door, the still air, the faint metallic scent that had started it all. He thought about how one woman's courage to speak up, even though it cost her life, had ultimately saved others. Years later, Daniel Ward remains in a maximum security facility. Those who've encountered him describe him as quiet, emotionless, and distant. He never shows remorse, never speaks about what he did, and never requests visitors. Psychologists who evaluated him said he displayed traits of narcissism and extreme detachment. Someone who viewed people not as humans but as possessions to control. The case continues to haunt those who worked on it. Even seasoned detectives admitted that something about it still lingered in their minds, the way Daniel blended into society so easily, how he hid his obsession behind politeness, how no one saw the monster behind the mask until it was too late. In the end, what made this murder so shocking wasn't just the brutality, but the realization that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes, it moves quietly, blending into the everyday, watching from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Emily Parker's story stands as a chilling reminder of that truth. A reminder that danger doesn't always come from the dark corners of the world, but sometimes from the people we trust to step inside our homes. Her courage in trying to expose the truth became her tragedy, but it also became her legacy. To this day, every new detective who joins the department is told about the Brookfield Lane case, not just as a lesson in investigation, but as a warning. Never underestimate the power of obsession, and never assume safety just because everything looks ordinary, because sometimes the most terrifying monsters wear the most familiar faces. And in the small town where it all happened, the house on Brookfield Lane still stands, empty, quiet, its windows sealed, its walls painted over. But locals say that at night, when the wind passes through the trees, it almost feels like the house remembers, like it still holds on to the silence that followed that night, the silence before everything changed.